Hello, and welcome to another episode of Three Wise DMs, the podcast where three dungeon masters who've been playing for way too long talk about all the things we do to try to make our games as good as they can be.
Hi, I'm Tony.
I said, you want to be starting something, you got to be starting something. You want to be starting something, you got to be starting something. How to get over, yeah, yeah. How to get under, yeah, yeah. Stuck in the middle. And then he says, and the pain is thunder, which is strange. That's a very strange line when you actually look up Michael Jackson lyrics. Anyway, hello again, everybody. Rock and Roll DM, Dave, hello, hi. And we have super special guests today. Returning as the reigning guest DM champion is who?
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris.
There he is.
I love that energy. Yes.
Right, we're ready. We're raring to go here. It's a Saturday. It's 1 p.m. We're coffeeed up. And as we've been doing, we have actually the four wise DMs today because we also have our friend Lenny Szot, who is new to our gaming group. He's been in our Tuesday night group that we talk about a little bit. But we're bringing him on here, and I'm going to let him explain it. So, Len, introduce yourself. Let us know what's going. How did you come into this crazy hobby that we do?
Hey, everybody. How did I come into this? Netflix. It's how I make all of my life decisions these days. It's like I knew you guys had played D&D for a long time. Like, I've talked to Chris about it a lot. And we were sitting around watching the last season of Stranger Things back in probably like August or something. And my girlfriend was like, we should try playing D&D. And then it kind of snowballed, and here I am. Now I'm on a D&D podcast. It's come full circle.
That's funny, because Chris, didn't you you had tried? I remember you saying you were trying to get Lenny into doing a game or something, or introducing him to it, right? For quite a while.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a fun hobby, and so you want to try to share it with those people that are your friends, as much as you can.
Absolutely.
You'd mentioned, you're like, hey, I want to kind of get my one friend into this. I think he'd be really good at it. Next thing you know, he's DMing a campaign, and I'm like, wow, that escalated quickly.
Right, and that's where I wanted to kind of go with this. Is Lenny, you're a great. We've talked about new DMs on the show before, how to onboard new DMs, best new DM advice, and literally any of the socials you go on, Facebook groups, whatever. The biggest question you're always getting is, one, how do I get into this if I want to DM? And two, what do I need to know? I'm about to run my first game. What's the best advice, right? And you get all those. So, Lenny, you literally came in, you're sitting there watching Stranger Things, which was a great season. So I don't doubt that that's the one that made you, we're going to do this now with the Hellfire Club and all that. But you came in and then you were like, I'll just run the game. I'll just do that. And I know for Tony and myself, in our groups, we were those people where we were like, okay, we all want to play D&D. Can you run it? And having to figure it out. But coming in completely fresh to this, what was that like? What were the stumbling blocks to that?
I think initially it was trying to figure out what the game itself is about, because it's referred to as a game. But if you approach it like you've been playing Monopoly it's way, you're stepping into something that's way different, and it's more about, imagination and storytelling and kind of working together as a group. It's not, I'm going to try to win this game. So initially it was finding out what the game was about. And then I think from there it was, I think at that point I had probably reached out to Chris and was like, hey, thinking about getting a game together. My niece and her fiance and my nephew wanted to play, and my girlfriend Lucy wanted to play. So we had a group, and Chris was kind of offering to come run a session for us.
Woo.
The ever struggles of getting 5 different schedules to mesh and find time. And it kind of was well, the more YouTube videos I had watched and the more online articles and stuff that I was reading, the mechanics of the game itself became kind of interesting to me. It's sort of the idea of running the whole thing became really like alluring, and it occurred to me that if I wanted our group to continue to play, I couldn't, I couldn't put Chris out like every time I wanted to play. So it just kind of made sense to like, you know what, I think I could do this. After that, I bought the starter set and started reading the Lost Mines of Phandelver, and that's kind of where that's kind of how I got going initially.
Which I'm definitely kind of jealous of, because I've wanted to run Lost Mines for a while and it just hasn't worked out. Like, I haven't been able to play it. Yeah, the true BBEG schedules. But Chris and Tony, like we've talked about on this, we used to talk with Thoro about it all the time, is that when you've been playing this stuff for a long time, you just come in with a knowledge of, an understanding of certain things that you take for granted. Like, you don't even realize what you know that no one else would know. Like this real esoteric jargon stuff, like armor class, hit points, attributes. Like, so like we all three came into this already. And Tony, I know we've talked about this at length, but both of you guys, like, what are your thoughts on that with coming in as a new DM with all of this real esoteric fucking jargon that's out there?
The one thing I would say is that when Lenny was talking to me and we were texting about it, the focus was he read Phandelver, and then actually started to craft a story, a reason why the people were there, took what was there and evolved it in a way where his focus was on the right level of it, where it was the module and the adventure itself and the characters versus being overly concerned about that. And he would express concern about that. And I'm like, it sort of works itself out at the table, right? Like, you figure out a lot of those things when you're in those situations. But
You're saying in terms of like some of the mechanics and the definitions of stuff like armor class and whatever, right?
Yeah, no, it works itself out in your first combat. You figure things out, right, and things go from there. But he had a really good focus on that, is that he read it, cover to cover, and had then took it and kind of evolved it a bit so that it worked for his party that he was putting together there. And then scheduling came in and right,
damn you,
shreds, as it often does with many of them. But it was the preparation was in the right vein, right?
Yeah, Tony, like we've said it many times, because you guys would talk a lot of times about like second edition and first edition, and Chris and I played a lot of like basic and first edition, but not it was when we were kids, right? So like I kind of take that with like all right, yeah, we're honorary, but like our real stuff is like the current stuff, Pathfinder 5e. But we always talk about like second edition, like the rules being very light on the game and all this kind of stuff. But then you would come back all the time and be like, yeah, well, what about weapon speeds? And what about all these other things that like
2e wasn't light.
What? Like, you're just supposed to know this
so
stuff now, right?
It's like trying to deadlift a dump truck. I mean, what's really a great resource is to have people in your life that can show you how to fill in some of these blanks. When I was cracking open that initial red box, those lessons were long and slow. I'm like, saving throws. What? And like, I'm 12 trying to read this from the original red box and going, when do I know I need to make a saving throw? And of course, you're not on the other side of the table going, my DM should tell me that. So like, fast forward all these years when Chris ran the Marvel campaign, I had read those rules half a dozen times, and I'm like, I don't freaking get it. Like I still
don't understand, right?
I cannot put a combat together. I've read this book 3 times, and honestly, I don't get it. He's like, oh, no, you do this. And I'm like, which was counterintuitive to Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm like, so my intuition is my initiative modifier and not my agility? He's like, yep. And I'm like, well, that's why, because that's where the rubber met the road from those 2 different systems. He's able to clear that up. So friendly resources, invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, so Len, like, did that type of stuff first? I want to get into the whole adventure hook thing, because I think I'm going to delve into that here, because there's something very important there for new DMs, but for experienced DMs too. With that kind of stuff, hit points, armor class. I know Chris was saying you were asking him these things. Did any of that because these days you have like your RPGs like on console or on PC, right? Like pretty much there's so much that's been influenced by D&D in video gaming. But did any of that make any sense to you, or did you come in being like, what the fuck are they talking about?
I mean, like, kind of like the system was fun. Like, I'm not the kind of guy that was playing like Skyrim or anything like that.
That's unfortunate because
I haven't read like a bunch of fantasy. I mean, I'm reading a lot now, but I hadn't read like a lot. You know, my knowledge of fantasy world was kind of like Game of Thrones, and that was kind of like it. You know,
right.
But no, I mean the mechanics, like reading the rules that came with the starter set, I could kind of understand, but like I still needed like a good. I think Chris, I had come over and we were just having a beer one night and like running through like game scenarios, like, you know, casting how some spells work versus others, how you know AC could be different because the character put their shield on their back and they're not, you know, it was like the little trying to figure out those little things. That didn't worry me as much running the first session as like trying to actually get the story over and get the players to like buy into what we were trying to do. Like that's what was way more like on my brain.
Yeah, Chris, so you guys kind of ran a couple, and that's awesome to, like Tony just said, to have that resource of someone showing you things of the game, right? Because that's kind of how a lot of us came into it. But like we've said, a lot of us were the ones that said, okay, we're going to run this now, you know, and teach people how to play. But you were kind of running some scenarios, just like a little like, okay, goblins attack or something.
The rules can be very dense, right? Like you start with the player's handbook, which is like, an inch thick. And then you have the DMG, which, I mean, you can get lost in. So I think a lot of times it's just about actually doing it in practice. And then all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense. And then, this is when you make a saving throw, kind of to Tony's point earlier, or, this is why that, and then you start to understand about things about cover and things like that. But you also start to understand that you don't have to be 100% about all that. It's more about the story. So it's like sometimes it happens and the rules go by and you don't have to beat yourself up because it probably happens for everybody, even for Mercer at times, I'm sure, right? Like he probably misses it somewhere or something like that.
All day. People, that's actually a funny thing because like they get such heat online. Like people will be like, that's not how cover works. And he's like, motherfucker, I'm running a game for 4 hours live. Like
I'm Matt Mercer.
Yeah, like shit. But Lenny, so I want to get into this, and then I want to kind of like delve into like the first session, because what Chris just said, I think, is an excellent point in that, and you hear this from, you know, DMs across the world, right? Is that in the end, the rules don't matter, right? Because what matters is the game and the story. Even to the point of like Professor Dungeon Master on Dungeon Craft will talk about he doesn't have rule books at the table. It's not allowed. He doesn't have cell phones. He also doesn't have rule books because he doesn't want to slow down and crack a rule book. He's going to make a ruling. You're going to go with it, and we'll revisit that next time. You know. Now I think that's a little extreme, but the big thing that you did though, which is so important, and it shows a level of intuitiveness, I think, for especially a new DM. You understood that you have to build this adventure hook. You need to hook these players in because, spoilers, Fandelver, I mean, it's been out for like 10 years, right? But you start and it's the goblin ambush scenario where you are just been hired out by Gundren Rockseeker to take supplies to Phandalin, right? And you're just on the road. And, you know, that's a fine start. You're sell swords, whatever. But you looked at that and said, no, I need to tie them in more ways. Is that accurate?
In a sense, at the time I was trying to take in as much, you know, D&D as I could. So I was watching a lot of stuff on YouTube. I started watching a lot of Matt Colville's videos, and I stumbled upon a guy, Ryan Doyle. He's got a channel, the Vertigrid table. I think I might be wrong on that, but I know his name's Ryan Doyle. And he had so I had run through Phandelver, and then I was kind of focusing on the first. It's broken up into like 4 sections, right?
Yeah.
And I was focusing on the first section, which was basically like the goblin ambush and then the goblin hideout, the Cragmaw hideout. The guy Ryan Doyle had said, you know, he had given a tip about trying to create a better hook because you're just essentially starting the adventure where you're on this mission that this guy gave you, and the whole rest of the story hinges on you wanting to follow this guy's lead and wanting to figure out what happened to him. But at no point in the story do you ever meet him. Do you ever like have a hook? Like, the starter set's great. It was great for new players. Like the people that came to play didn't have to create characters. There were characters sitting there. They all had hooks tied into Phandelver, reasons why they were going to be there or why they would travel there. But at no point did they ever give you like a reason to want to seek out Gundren Rockseeker again. He's just some guy that hired you. Like, why wouldn't you just deliver his goods and, all right, on to the next thing, right? So this guy Ryan Doyle had kind of given the scenario that the character should actually meet him prior to prior to the first goblin encounter. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I went with it. I just sort of wrote a little tavern scene because every video I wrote said all adventures should start in a tavern. So we started in a tavern, right? And Gundren comes in and starts talking to the players and tells them the reason he wants them to, not divulging too much of the story, but he basically the scenario was that he came in and said, I can't give you too many details, but I need you guys to take these mining supplies out to Phandalin for me. So
that's excellent. It shows you that you sought out somebody who kind of gave an idea of scenario of how to do the mechanic of it, as it were. But you got that sense as you're reading, like, why? Like, and then also, like, if these goblins, why the fuck am I staying here? Chris, we had the same thing. Tony and I have talked when you've been running the Tomb of Annihilation campaign. That unfortunately currently is on hiatus, but we're working on it, people. We're working. Same thing, though. Like, so you literally have to get people to chult, right, to then seek out this death curse and seek out a lich. And it's like, why am I doing this? And why are we doing this? I'm first level, right? Like, I have a gun and I'm a hippo, man. Like, what? Why am I doing this?
And none of this makes sense.
You had players who already were experienced and was like, no, we have to build our characters into this, right?
No, absolutely. And I think it's like, the modules are great jumping off points, right? Like, I got it a little bit from your Strahd campaign and other things that I experienced, is that you take it, but then you have to add something to it. And unfortunately, the module itself just kind of drops you in Schult, right? And says, okay, you have to care about it, kind of like to Lenny's point. And so I use DM's Guild to find some additional material, but to help to build out the character story so that they come there, but there's a reason beforehand that brings them together, that drives them into the story, so that it's not like, it's not like, boom, portal opens up, you step through, and then all of a sudden, like, it starts right there. There's a reason that kind of draws them through there. Didn't play out the whole ship adventure across the ocean, but the idea was set beforehand. So I thought that was really valuable. Yeah. It's like a nice session zero to it.
It's an excellent point, because that's why I wanted to kind of jump on it, Len, because that's a very experienced mindset to come with that a lot of people don't get. Like, that's some of like the soft stuff of that. I'm only still now learning that years and years in, where I really leaned heavily into it, like with the Dragonlance campaign that we just started. They had I think the Shadow of the Dragon Queen might have one of the best adventure hooks in the modern series of adventures that 5e has put out. I think the writers really hit one very, very good in terms of Ispen Greenshield. I'm not going to give anything away for people because it's still brand new, but I leaned even heavier into that to really tie the players in. And for me, I think it really worked. And Len, it seemed, so you did the adventure hook, but then your players bought in, but then it sounded from when we were talking the one time over at Chris's, like they really bought in by the end of the thing. So kind of tie all of that together, and then we'll jump into some new stuff. But you tied them in, and then the mechanics of the game itself. Now you're running it, right? You're on the open road. How much did that affect it? Were you going back to rule books? Did you care? Did you just make that type of thing?
There were a couple points during that first session where I had to take a minute and actually look something up. But chances are, if you're a first-time DM and you're new to the game and you're running a game for a group, chances are the group of players is probably pretty new themselves, right? So it didn't really matter that much. Like anything that we were looking up, like my nephew actually had a rule book with him, and when we hit like a snag, I was like, I'm not sure what to do with this, and we were both looking it up, trying to figure out how to do it. It was like it kind of became a party at that point where everybody was kind of helping everybody else like play, because I had 3 people who had never played before, and one person who had just watched some online videos, and then me who had watched some online videos and was attempting to run it. So yeah, some things came through. Probably the funniest scenario was, and during the first Goblin ambush, one of the, I think it was my niece's character, she's like, "Oh, I speak Goblin. Let me try to talk to him." But they're in the middle of like trying to stab you and shoot you with arrows. Like, now's not the time for diplomacy. So she's like, "I'm going to try to talk to him." I was like, "Okay, like try to talk to him." And the Goblin just came up and took a whack at her. And she's like, but you're in the middle of a fight. Like, why would you want to talk to him?
Like the shots have already been fired, and now they're like, I think I could talk him down here.
So honestly, yeah, that's definitely a soft skill thing for sure, because on all the great rules, encounters, and story you have, it isn't going to equal a lick of anything if the hook is soft, if you can't bring anybody in. You know why we played in Dave's Ravenloft? Because we couldn't get the hell out. I didn't want to stay there. The place was terrible. We get to Cholt. We're like, this is a fetid jungle. There's a lich. If you die here, you're dead forever. Like, no thanks. But Chris tied it in nicely. He brought in spirits, and he said you'd be protectors of the land, and got us invested and gave us neat stuff. That was a really solid way to handle that. And I said before, at Storm King's Thunder, you show up, you have the various reasons why you're going to be there to show the Nightstone. You get there, the place has been rolled by cloud giants. I mean, what's your initial reaction supposed to be? Like, you know what? We're going to take these guys down. We're gonna seek down this floating castle and break some skulls. Like, no, we're not. Why would I think to do that? This is like so out of my pay grade. It's not even funny.
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons that I had specifically tried to tie in my character to why would I care about giants at first level, right? But if you don't have that, like that can be a little rough.
It was such a payoff on the first game session for me, like to get them to tie in. And at the end of that first Goblin ambush, when the last Goblin jumps the brush and runs away, and I sat back, I was like, all right, what do you guys want to do? And they literally were like talking amongst themselves, like, what should we do? What should we do? And should we just go to town? And they're like, no, like these guys beat up our friends. We got to go get them. And I was just sitting back like, yes, like I got them. Yes.
Yes.
Well done.
There are a few things that feel like that in this world, man. Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so Lenny, what's something? So you've got a chance to, dig your teeth into this, and you've read some things, ran some modules. What would you recommend for a new DM to absolutely stay away from? What's the ultimate beginner's trap you should avoid at all costs?
I know what Tony's answer is.
Yes, you do.
I'd say trying to do too much. Definitely prepare. Like, definitely, take notes and take what you think you're going to need, but don't be rigid and don't try to force too much on the players. Just kind of let it happen, right?
Chris, what do you think from a more seasoned DM's perspective, the veteran? What should we avoid? You've done a lot of campaigns, you've done the storytelling. For the more advanced players, what kind of advice can you offer them?
It's kind of funny. Lenny kind of got my answer there. That it's about being head up about things. Is that you have to have notes. You have to understand what your world is there, but it's about being head up and interacting with the players and kind of being in the situation with them a little bit. Like it's you can get lost with too much description of this or that, and you lose the overall thread of the story. like that's been the hardest part, is to try to keep myself from like kind of wanting to go back to the rule book or back to the other things. The standard damage, me and you, Dave, were talking about it, right? Like it's such an easy thing to be able to just say, if there's a hit, okay, there's the damage. I don't need to roll this dice constantly. I don't need to keep on having to take my focus away from what's going on out there, right? And reading the faces and making sure that everybody's having a good time, right? Or, you know, to the right degree. Like, there's bad things are going to happen, but that people are engaged.
No, I think, Chris, that's a great point. Actually, that's an excellent. We're gonna trademark that. That's another 3WD trademark. Head up, be head up in it. That's actually really excellent, because what you're kind of saying is be aware of what's happening at the table. Don't be concerned so much with what you prepped or the session. You still need to know that, but see what's happening and allow that improv and that actual live play to inform where does this go next. I think that's great. So to be a head up DM, I think that's actually really good. Lenny, I will say, I love that you took all of my advice that I've been giving for like over 100 episodes without ever actually like talk to me or anything. I think it's great. I feel very vindicated, because one, the first thing you did, you used a published adventure. You didn't go in and be like, let me try to build this, because spoilers, everybody, Tony's answer for the last question was, don't build a town. Don't do it. Don't do it, because you'll.
It's a trap.
3 months. Yeah, it's a trap. Yeah, Akbar has already let you know. But you used a published adventure, and you used the starter one, which is an excellent, and it's still listed as one of the greatest.
It's so accessible to somebody coming in, and there's no reason you couldn't run it without changing the hook or anything like that. It's just, it made it juicier for the first time, for sure.
It's funny because I'm actually been running, I restarted the girls campaign that I'm running. They were running Round of the Frost Maiden. We've gone over why I would decide to run them through a survival horror a la John Carpenter's The Thing. Regardless, let's not delve into that again. But we switched it over, and it's a little more high fantasy, some whimsy, that kind of thing. So I actually grabbed, because of an idea I had, the newest starter set, which has the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle on it. And I would love to see, to have you take a look at that, Len, and to see, because I think they actually got that feedback, and they made it even more accessible for new DMs, because they even prompt you, like, this might be a time when you ask them X, Y, Z, whatever. So I really think that they kind of got that's to help lead you in. But you use the published adventure, which I always tell people, even if they change all the names and everything, it's already there for you. And two, you use the pregens. And Tony, we've talked about this, and we've had our discussions and disagreements in the past. Do you use pregens? Do you create characters? Because there is something magical about creating characters. But anyone who sat and created characters with people that have never done it and never played a game like this before, that's your night. There it is. Especially if you don't know, like Len, you didn't know how to necessarily make a character at that point. So you went with the pregens in the box, and it doesn't sound like that affected gameplay at all.
No, like I said, they make it really accessible. It's those characters already have hooks into the town, already, like if you're trying to explain to somebody how the game works, like starting with creating the characters, like I wouldn't argue against somebody trying to do that for the first time, but that would be, God, for me, that would be like, why do I want to come back and play this a second time? Like all we did was create a character. And getting back to your advice, the one thing Chris kept telling me before the first game session was just get them to the point where they're rolling dice and everything will kind of play out, and everything will happen after that. You said it to me probably like 10 times in that week leading up to me, like, just get them rolling dice. Everything will work out. So, yeah, I mean, for a first game session to create player, I guess that would be interesting to some people, but like, I just wanted to play. So like getting them to roll dice was the whole, focus.
Chris, go into that a little bit more, because that's actually a really, again, you're hitting some things. You head up DM, and now get them to roll in dice. So like, that's actually really great advice. What kind of break that out. Like, what are you looking for when you were telling that to Len?
Well, you can get lost in if there's a role play element to it. You can get lost in the story. You can get lost in the other things. A lot of times it's, you have to get the players interactive into what you want to do. And so the easiest way, besides a lot of people don't want to speak back to you, right? The tavern owner's like, hey, where's everybody's going? And there's going to be somebody, right? There's going to be one or two guys in the party always that are going to be the people that go to talk to them. So the way you get them engaged is roll for other things, right? Roll for this, roll for that, get people into it, skill challenges and stuff like that. And it gets people interactive. And because at the heart of it, it's a game, and the dice rolling is the easiest mechanic to kind of introduce the randomness, right?
Yeah.
It's like, even as charismatic as I could be as a person, it's that dice roll that really tells you how my character was, that whether or not my character was that charismatic, right?
Yeah, there's no consequences until the point where you're actually rolling dice, right?
It just adds that little bit of spice that makes it a game, that makes it fun.
So Chris, just to bounce back off of that question too, from what we were asking Len, if you remember back when we kind of came back into this, so Chris was at the table the first time I sat back down and actually ran a game, and we were doing the Pathfinder campaign that we've talked about. That was built on such hard rails and so many tropes of fantasy and all this. But we started, and I had gotten the beginner box from Pathfinder as well. It was 1E at the time. And I just gave you guys the 4 pregens. It was the wizard, cleric, rogue, fighter. It was your classic gauntlet, characters. If you can think back to that, because you had played when we were kids, right? And during AD&D times. And Red Box. So coming back into it, I don't feel like that affected the gameplay in a negative way. What were your recollections of that when you came back into the game?
I think it makes it good to be able to quickly introduce people into it. I enjoyed it. I've named him Funk and Hottie Peak. Now Wizard's going to come after me for stealing the Wizard's name there, but because that was one of the ones I really remembered from early in the day. I enjoyed it, but I tell you what is that as I've gone through and I've DM'd and done other things, the more that I put into players now, each time that I get to build another character and I get to introduce more backstory and hooks into the backstory, and the background isn't just something I'm grabbing because I need these 2 skills, right? Like, it has something to do with that. I think Tony's Ragnarok campaign with the backgrounds and everything in there and the clans did a really good job of making, like, as I'm building it, we're going to start, but I feel like he's part of the world already. Like, he has an area where he's from. There's things going on. There's the backgrounds are part of that area. Like, it's very cool. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And if you're like somebody like a new DM, like Lenny, if you were jumping into an existing game group and somebody had been running games, and then you were like, you know what, I want to try my hand at this. That's a completely different conversation, because when you already have people that are experienced players that maybe have run games, that know the game, then you can sit back and kind of play into it more. But yeah, yours was a very unique, but I don't think uncommon example where, hey, especially, I think people either they come onto something like a Critical Role or The Legend of Vox Machina or Stranger Things or The Big Bang Theory or anything like that, and they say, oh yeah, D&D, I've always wanted to play that, or what is that like, or there's some kind of fascination, and then they go, okay, how do we do it? Because as you said, you don't just crack open the box, like you crack open a big strategy game like Axis and Allies or the Game of Thrones, the board game, or something like that, right? Or Gloomhaven, right? And you get like a 40, 50-page rule book. You're like, oh, okay, it's one of these games, right? The player's handbook, as Chris made the point, is 300 pages. Here's the rule book, guys. Oh, there's also 2 other rule books. Like, what the fuck? Like, what are you supposed to do with that?
That's what getting back, like, that starter set, they make it accessible. They break the rule book down. I can't remember how
it's
big the rule book is in that, but it's like, it's like 20, 30 pages. It's just the basics that you need to get through that module and nothing more.
Absolutely. No, I think it's actually quality set of rules. I don't think you ever necessarily need to go past them, other than you kind of make a ruling on the existing basic rules and just go, it works this way, that type of thing as you go forward.
I mean, if you start reading through that and you don't end up purchasing one of the other books along the way, I'd be kind of surprised. Like, if you're having fun with it, right?
How many of them have you purchased at this point?
The first one was the Player's Handbook. It was shortly after I got the starter set. And then I was running a duet with campaign with Lucy, and I needed the monster manual for something, so that kind of made its way here. And then somebody got me the DM's guide for Christmas this past year.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, there's a reason it's the core rules.
Yeah.
And as we've said many times, guys, crack open your DMG. There is vast information in there that you think that 5e didn't put in. It's in there. Just go past the first 20 pages. You have to keep going past the treasure tables.
Yeah, no, they probably already thought of it. A couple of times I've gone back and I've flipped to the end and I'm like, oh, there's lasers in here. Okay, never mind. It wasn't anything new in the slightest. Yeah.
Yeah, as crazy as it might have sounded in Tony's Storm King's Thunder campaign when he gifted Zhang the antimatter rifle. No, that's in the DMG. It's right back there in the exotic weapon or some shit. I don't even remember.
Like peanut butter and jelly for our gaming environment, right? The antimatter rifle.
That's awesome.
So Len, with that too, so you had made the point too. So the session went phenomenally, which is awesome, because that's what hooks people. But then the big bad BBEG came along of schedules, and you still haven't really been able to continue onwards with that campaign yet, right? No,
and it's breaking my heart. It's such a cool, fan. The story itself is kind of it's sort of cool. There's a lot of, once you get into the town, there's so many different things that the players can follow, and it's just it's breaking my heart. I just want to run the end of it. I just want them to get to the end so we can,
So at what point are you gonna just be like, fuck it and just run it for us? I'm just saying. I mean, you're live, so it's not live, it's recorded, but you're recording live.
That would be, that's fun. Since we met at Chris's, that's been stuck in my head. You were like, the last thing you said to me was like, I want you to run something for us this year.
Well, there you go. There's a great question here. That I think can be difficult, because I remember Chris having said this when you started Tomb, and you were like, oh, I'm going to be running this for the Three Wise DMs, right? And we were like, dude, just run, right? It was cool because you started with Marvel, right? And Marvel, I knew what was going on as much as you can know in that old system, right? But you were free to be like, no, this is my thing, right? But you were running the 5e game for experienced players. And did you find that to be challenging, difficult? Did it increase? Did it whatever? And then Lenny, the same question. If you were going to run, what would be some of the things you would be concerned about with that?
Well, I mean, I tell you, it was totally intimidating at first. It isn't that intimidating once you get to know what DMs are about. Once you kind of DM, you get a better empathy for what other DMs are going for, right? And so they're trying to do with it. But I mean, bless his soul, Thorin. He was a powerful player who would challenge your things. So from the very beginning in the Marvel game, he broke me from box text and all those other things into have to being agile and thinking of ways. He would come up with solutions and different things, and it would force you to have to kind of roll with it. So it was good. It was painful at times, right? It was tough, and you're like, I'm trying to think of some way, right, with this, especially in the Marvel system, because, man, does it get wonky, especially at the cosmic levels we are, the way the rules work. It was, in the end, it made me better because it was, he wasn't doing anything that was wrong there. He was just testing the limits of the world there, right? He wasn't necessarily following the guided track that I had crafted for the past couple of days. He's like, nope, I want to see what this world's all about, right? And so he's like, I'm going to make a right turn here instead of left. So I think that's you have to learn to be very agile. Like it's just outlines for me now. It's just ideas and the main key points that I need to keep track of, because the rest of it is you can't hold on to it too tight. It just it gets away from you.
Excellent points. Lenny, same question though. If you were going to run it for people that have played, right, that have DM before, that have played before, that know the game, blah 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 blah. Like, what are the things that would, aside from just the general trepidation, right, but the things that you would be concerned about?
I'd say having the characters done. I think there's one thing that I wish I had spent more time on. It was how to present specific NPCs and stuff to the group. I didn't necessarily, I had a voice in my head, but I didn't walk around the house practicing it. So it was kind of like not, it wasn't crisp the later. First time it came out, right? So, in as much that you would want to use, you don't necessarily right. Everybody tells you, yeah, you don't have to do voices, but in some situations it makes things a little bit more, it makes it a bigger world. But yeah, I mean, having presentation down, I think would be the scariest thing. I know, if I ran it for you guys and I was listen, I don't know what to do with this rule, be honest, I know you guys are going to help me out and get me through it. Not that you want to be in that situation, but yeah, it's the other part. It's having the story hooks and the characters down.
So I would throw out the advice of if you're using the published material like Dave suggests, some of that's really great. It lays out a lot of fantastic foundation for you, but do not be afraid to take away from it or add to it. You're not trapped with what you have there. And when you're running this game, and whether you're a seasoned or a new DM, do not allow combat to swallow or define your entire game. Use it as much as you want. It's a great type of encounter to have, just like everything else. You want to have a battle? Fantastic. You are not locked into running 9 combat encounters for the end of the evening with X amount of balanced monsters. You don't need to. Just get out there, flex, have fun, move on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent point. But yeah, I we joke about it, but no, I mean, published material, man, use it, because you absolutely, as Lenny did, as Chris did, as I did, I changed Curse of Strahd right from the get-go. And I had changed it with, I've said it many times before, Lunch Break Heroes had excellent ways to craft even more lore and tie-ins to the world to lead into. But yeah, absolutely. Also, Chris, to your point too, powerful player, because that Curse of Strahd group and game would have gone vastly differently if Thornton hadn't been playing that Warlock. Because yes, testing the absolute limits of play.
But it's a good exercise. At first you can chafe at it, but it's the challenge that makes you better as a DM there.
Yeah, you cannot grow in those comfort zones. No.
I would say as a player as well, getting to play with you guys for as much as we have the past couple months, there's a lot of nights I walk away from our Tuesday night group just man, I wouldn't how did he think of doing that? And I had no idea that was there, and little things that kind of float in my head until the next week when we play.
We were just doing that. Tony and Chris were involved. Chris was doing a one-shot, a high-level, 18th level one-shot for Tony's birthday. He tied back in some of our Curse of Strahd characters and story, which I appreciated the nod. But our friend Luke, who we've talked about on the show before, was playing with us. And you want to talk about someone who is old school and thinks how can I use this stuff beyond, okay, go 60 feet and it does this damage. No. Luke is not asking that. He's asking, how big is the room? And it's not because he's casting Fireball, right?
No, it's because he's
about to create a force wall that somehow breaks. It's phenomenal to see. But Tony, this is a little bit of an aside, but in that way, Lenny brought up that interesting point, when you start to see how people push into the game, and 5e doesn't allow as much of it as maybe some of the older editions, but push into the game to see what the boundaries are, as someone who's played through all of, the whole iterations of D&D.
The rules were a lot softer and there was a lot more complexity to it. So, as I say, softer. There was a lot of places where you could have made wrong turns. Like someone's melding through stone, and you're like, well, I tried to dispel magic. And they would try all these crazy applications that are not covered, and you have to make a ruling that feels fair and consistent. So you just kind of have to do the best you can with that situation. Pushing the boundaries of it, that will really test your mettle as a DM, because you got to make the call.
That with the face rip a little bit too is that it was soft, whether they just hadn't had a chance to really harden up the edges there, but there's a lot of softness in those power descriptions and everything like that, where you have to continually make rulings about this. I want to do this, because you're superheroes too, but it was definitely challenging.
So just last question here, Lenny, for you. It just occurred to me as we were just talking about that. 5e, we've talked about many times, is a really good rule set. It's very streamlined. There's not too much complexity, but there's enough to make it interesting, and you can always add crunchiness if you need to or want to. But you played 5e, and you played a little bit in our Marvel game that Chris ran for us. Outside of that, that's been your only experience with tabletop stuff, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So with that, you were coming into the rule set. Did you feel like reading those rules that like you felt a lot more covered, like there wasn't as much gray area as maybe there might be in other systems? I mean, not that you know this experientially, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I had a good grasp of what the system was. It was my first time seeing a game like this, so it was immensely interesting. Like I had no idea. When you sit on the outside of D&D, you really don't have an idea of what it's really like to play or to be in a game. And then you start reading it, you're like, all right, this is kind of cool. Like I'm into this, and there definitely wasn't anything that it was way out there. I'm sure there was a couple things I was texting Chris about, like, hey, what do I do if this happens? What do I do if this happens? Like, how does this tie in? But there wasn't like gaping holes that they left in what you were supposed to be doing.
All right, awesome. So how about time for some final thoughts? Lenny, why don't you lead us off here? Just obviously we went over your experiences in New DM, but like the advice you would give to people in your shoes, now that you have broken your cherry, as it were.
Yeah.
A horrifying analogy.
Yeah, really. My advice, just do it. Just freaking do it.
Nike.
Just do it. Like, honestly, like,
we're getting by Nike. That's
in all seriousness, like you're gonna get caught up thinking, oh, I don't know enough of the rules or anything like that, but just freaking run it. And like you're gonna screw up, you're gonna make rulings, but do it and talk to your players afterwards. Hey, what did you guys think about this? How'd you like this? Find some people that you game with and that are going to give you some good feedback, and you're just going to get better at it every time you go. And with that being said, I mean, God, there's a wealth of information out in the interwebs. I mean, go watch YouTube, go watch Matt Colville, go watch Ryan Doyle, go listen to a podcast, go listen to Critical Role. The one that I had listened to when I started was Not Another D&D Podcast. And
yeah,
they're just like, it's a more comedic take on things, but their stories are great, and their gameplay is good, and they're strong players, and you're going to learn a lot. But yeah, just get out there and freaking play. It's awesome.
Great points. Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I think that doubling down on what Lenny said too, and there's a lot of resources out there. There's obviously the main modules, campaign settings, and stuff like that, but places like DM's Guild and Drive-Thru and everything like that, there is a wealth of information, and you can trade you can work your magic on everything, or you can take published adventures. You can go the Colville route. But there's a wealth of information, adventures, creatures, new monster manuals, other things out there that you can use as ideas to be able to create and to add spice. And you don't have to feel like you have to create the whole situation on your shoulders. You can grab another town from another module and bring it in there. You can grab a hook from a different module and move it in there, or move in a different monster from a new expanded monster manual or something like that. So
Yeah, I would say be prepared as you need to be. And I know that's very generally speaking, but make an outline and stick to it. And I swear behind, if you are going to use published material, I mean, again, when I used Storm King's Thunder, I read sections of that, and I'm like, this is great. And I read other sections, I'm like, there is no way we're going to do this. It's gone. It's swept right off my desk. Never bring it up again. Don't be afraid to do that. You got to play to who's in your room, what they're going to like. And I know that's difficult to figure out at first, but as you play with them more, you'll get a more comfortable feel of what they're looking for and what you want to do as a DM.
My final thoughts are exactly what I have been saying now for 2.5 years.
He's consistent.
I feel very vindicated here. Lenny has been my prototype, and I didn't even know it. But, use the published adventures. Use a short one. Use one of the starter kits, whatever, right? In whatever system you're playing, too. There's a starter adventure for any system you got, right? I've said, use the Pregens unless you're experienced and you feel comfortable showing players how to make characters. But in Lenny's situation, I thought you went exactly the right path. And your point of the amount of information that is out there right now, podcasts, websites, blog series, YouTube series, there's so much info from really, really great DMs. I myself used Matt Colville. The Running the Game series is indispensable for people. Yeah. And then you just kind of jump off from there. And then obviously, I latched on to somebody like Matt Mercer because he's like my spirit animal. So he's he plays into a lot of what I want out of the game too. Anyway, so those are my final thoughts. But Lenny, I thought you said it great, was just do it. And for those people out there that are wondering, if this isn't the most perfect example where everyone just goes, hey, we want to play, and you just did it. You just figured it out, and you ran a game, and it went awesome. And you as intimidated as you might have been by some of the things, you just went with it, and it sounded like it was a wild success. And now you're super into the hobby, and that's a wild success too. Yeah. So thank you again, Len, for coming on. And Chris, thanks again for gracing us with your guest DMing presence.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and as we do each week, we are going to let our old erstwhile leader take us out.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of Three Wise DMs. Again, if you want to hear us talk about your question, please feel free, enter it in that What's Your Problem field on our website. Send it to our email address, threewisedms@gmail.com, or talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're always on the lookout for DMs who could use some help. That's what we're here to do. So, and if you like what we're talking about, if you like what you're hearing from us, please leave us a 5-star rating in your podcast platform. Share it. Tell your friends. All that stuff really helps us grow, and we should appreciate any support you can give us. Plus, you might have friends who have questions they want answered, and we'd love to help them as well. So that's it for this week. We'll talk to you next time. Three Wise DMs.